Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Pro Engineering. This is going to be kind of a strange video that I've never really done before. I'd like to review the kit, but this needs to be built, and then I'm going to do a bunch of work to the body, so the final review of the kit won't have the body, but it'll have the chassis. I don't really know how this is going to play out, so my apologies in advance. For those of you unaware, I love the Fiat 131. That's not all of them. Wagon is a Fiat 131. Fiat 131, 131, 131, tiny 131, tinier 131, 131, 131. There's another one right there, another one right there. And we have here my work 131s. My son's Fiat 131, and that's my Fiat 131 Racing. Needless to say, when I saw Tamiya was coming out with a 131, I had to have it. I'm going to pause on my judgment about certain issues that I see, because step one, I think we need to tackle the chassis. This is the MF01X chassis. Now, I do not own one of these, but I own quite a number of M series chassis, the M01, M02, and M03, none of which I find particularly good. Although I have applications for all of them, I hope to see a significant improvement with this particular chassis. A little bit annoyed about one particular thing here, and this is something that I've gotten a ton of pushback, and I'm kind of surprised about that. This is an M chassis. I've always considered the M chassis to be for 1/10 scale vehicles that are a bit smaller. The Fiat 500, for example, the Mini Cooper, the Fiat 600, that's the OT 1000, I believe. These are 1/10 scale vehicles that are just smaller. The Audi Quattro, the Lancia 037, and the Lancia Delta are all on full-size 1/10 scale chassis. So now if you have all of those, like I do, now you're going to have big car, big car, big car, tiny car. I don't understand that. And no, the 131 is not smaller than any of those cars. So if anything, the Delta would occupy the same space minus the trunk. The Lancia 037, which is based on the Lancia Scorpion or Lancia Monte Carlo, depending on what country, is significantly smaller than this car. And the Audi Quattro would be on par because there was a four-door variant of that particular Audi. Rant aside, let's take a look at the kit. One kind of cool thing about this, and yes, this is four-wheel drive, but that's easily remedied. I like this Abarth holographic logo down here. Very neat. There's a serial number here. It's a TZ03756. So it's all fully licensed, which is very common for Tamiya. I do have ball bearings to put in this. I could not find this aluminum motor mount, which I'm going to locate because I kind of like that. In terms of heat dissipation, this is always really good. But overall, I could not find many upgrades to this car. I have opened the box already, so forgive me if some things are not in place. One little bit of disappointment is the manual is just generic. In this case here, it's the MF01X chassis. And all my other manuals, at least my older ones, are unique to the particular car, and I can understand why Tamiya is doing this. This is a significant cost to have multiple manuals for multiple cars that are on the exact same chassis. Still, it's kind of sad. Check this out. I couldn't believe this. You paint the car blue with the yellow top, and then you add 3,000 decals along the lower half, basically, to paint the bottom half of the car yellow. That's insane. The grille is peculiar as well. It's a multi-piece grille. I don't quite understand why at this point. They've also got these transparent headlight decals, and then these are the auxiliary lamp, which are not transparent. The car does have buckets for headlights and taillights to give you full illumination on the vehicle, which is pretty cool. I know there's a lot of Tamiyas like that. Here is the body, and again, it's just small. Later on, I'll compare this with the Rally Legends body. to give you a size comparison, as well as the Fiat 600 and the 500. So yeah, I don't even care that this may be more of a 10th scale of the actual car. My concern again, or grievance I should say, is relative scale. Relatively speaking, this is significantly smaller in terms of this particular world than a lot of other cars that it's alongside, which is a little weird. Detail-wise, pretty uninspiring. There are a lot of details on this body that are very, very different from the actual car, and a lot of these things are a result of actually trying to get the body to fit on an RC car chassis. There are hardly any RC cars in existence that are true one-to-one, exact scaled-down replicas. So I can understand a lot of this. One area that I've been complaining about are the headlights. I think they look absolutely atrocious. So that's one of my many things that I'm going to update. Otherwise, the basic form factor of the car is there. Again, it's a 131. They're pretty boxy. Looking in here, really not much to see, just a bunch of parts. I don't want to sit here and build the entire thing in front of you. That's not what I find enjoyable. You may like that, but I try and keep this channel something fun for me too, and I don't want to do that. What I will do is over the course of the build, I'm going to pause on certain areas that I find interesting. Maybe there's an area that I think is weird, an area that I think is cool, a unique way that I'm assembling something. This way, you'll kind of see what I'm up to. Here's the injection molded parts tree. These are for the headlights. Kind of odd how they're installed. Tamiya is calling out double-sided taping these in. So there are little recesses there for the tape, which is very nice. Same with the taillights, all double-sided taped in there. The rear wing, side vents, the auxiliary lamps, side view mirrors. Don't know what some of these other parts are, but I suspect they're for attaching everything. Chassis is in this kind of a nice gray color. The tires, the typical M series tires. These wheels have been out for many, many years, but we're not using that. All of the hardware. It's supposed to be a sport-tuned motor. Oh, a torque-tuned, pardon me. There it is. And all Tamiyas now, or I shouldn't say all. There's going to be some that don't. This is a Hobby Wing ESC, which is outstanding. These are rock solid units. This is a 1060. I have quite a number of the 1080s, but these are great units, and they work with LiPo batteries. Amazing. Let's get cracking. Getting started on the build. You can see that everything laid out. What year is this? We're building differentials. That's an ancient, I'm sure Tamiya pulled these out of the Blackfoot. Why not? Oh my God. Why do these still exist? This isn't my first rodeo. The plastic used on these parts is insanely hard. In fact, it reminds me of a number of other cars' plastics, which are insanely hard. Basically, over time, just using a self-tapping screw is going to cause stress fractures in any hole that has a self-tapped screw, like all of these down here. So the goal is to completely ignore any self-tapped hole and to just tap it with a M3 by 0.5 tap, and then just use all my own machined hardware. The drawback is it takes a lot more time to do that, and a machined screw hole in a plastic part is going to be weaker, but it's not going to crack. There is a 21 millimeter long version of this 5 millimeter shaft, and it's not here. It should have been in screw bag A. I've gone through all the screw bags, and yeah, it's not here. It's this one right there, BA15, and I've looked everywhere. It's not here. Whoops, just for later. Okay, use this brass tube. Should be good enough to replace that part that's missing. Another weird thing, you've got to put these little foam, actually the manual says sponge, and it came with this and this. I think I was supposed to be this. But you got to put one pad there, one pad there. There's two in here on each side of the gear, but why? I've never had to do this on an RC car before. Very odd. I've got the Futaba servo mounted, and this is interesting because servo mounting is dependent on what style of servo. So this one here is either, I mean, it's a Futaba servo, so it's pretty much Tamiya. So that can bolt onto this bracket, or if you have a different kind of servo, you have to install with these adjustable height spacers. And on top of that, this servo is slotted into this transmission half. It's the front trans, which is kind of interesting. And then it has a spacer because its placement is dependent on centralizing this servo horn. So if the servo is a different width, there are two different spacers you can use to offset that. I mean, I feel like it's the solution to a problem that shouldn't exist. I own a lot of RC cars, and I've never seen this before. So I'm putting in the drive shaft. What the hell is going on? 173 millimeter drive shaft. Is there a second drive shaft somewhere? Just occurred to me that these are the shock bodies. Couldn't find the shock shafts, even though I'm using the oil-filled ones. I figure I just build these for the heck of it, and I realize that's the shock shaft. I've got the back of the car, well, I've got most of the car together, but I just realized this. If you look at it like that, look how far that arm goes down versus this arm. Now, part of that has to do with the fact that I threw on just some old Tamiya oil-filled shocks that I had, completely ignoring whatever spacers are on the factory shocks to prevent this. But you can see how much droop this side has. And on the other side, the reason it doesn't do that is because of the four-wheel drive mechanism. So a little bit unfortunate because you can see how little travel there is there versus how much there is here. I'm actually wondering if that goes up the same. Yeah, it goes up the same amount. It just seems like on an off-road-ish chassis that it would have more travel. How's the front? I mean, I guess fundamentally this is an M chassis, so it's probably enough. I just thought that was a little bit interesting. So this part came in, which goes right there. It's really just a heatsink, but you know, why not? I'm going to go put in the speed control and, oh my God. There we go. Now the battery slot on the side is rectangular, which is great because it fits a standard hard pack LiPo. The problem is, that's all it'll fit. I run a lot of these smaller ones, and none of my other cars really have any problem running a variety of packs. I don't want to complain all that much because this is a very, very common size, so that's good. The other issue I noticed is, so this is the retainer, which is actually made out of the hard polycarbonate ABS blend. That's speculative, of course. So on that side, you've got it, you know, fine. On this side, it really puts a lot of stress right there. Perhaps this is designed for the LiPo packs where they both come out on the top. It doesn't even look like it does. Secondly, it's just a little odd that with lithium polymer batteries, it's so exposed. Most of the RC cars I have, the battery is fully enclosed, at least modern RC cars. In this case here, it's really out there. So if you're not running a hard pack, you're really susceptible to potential fire. If something comes up in here and stabs the battery if you hit the car. Just a little bit of an odd design choice, given that they designed the whole car. This sounds like a diesel locomotive. So I'm in the studio again. I'm not here at my desk because I'm working on this. So we are to the right of it for the time being. I wanted to end the video by basically kind of pointing out some size discrepancies between some of these vehicles. Now, you might be asking when I finished the body. Now, there's going to be another video covering the cosmetic changes to the body. So my apologies, we are a bit out of order, but nevertheless, I think this will get my point across. Here we have the Lancia 037. The 037 was based, at least this middle section here, was based on another car called the Scorpion or the Monte Carlo, depending on what country you're in. The scale of these two cars is significantly off. I think if you measure the wheelbase on this, it's pretty darn close to being an actual 110 scale, which means this one over here, if you measure the wheelbase, is significantly larger. So I'm gonna try and do that later and see what we get from these two, because who knows, maybe I'm completely wrong. Looking over at this is the M03 Fiat 500. Whereas the 500 looks ginormous compared to the 131, I'm more inclined to believe that the 500 is actually closer in scale to this. Now, I can also do the conversion here and see what we get, but what I really wanted to see would be what Rally Legends did back there. So Rally Legends made the 131 in a more, well, again, I hate to say 110 scale, in the 110 scale form factor, which means this vehicle and this vehicle look more appropriate on a shelf side by side. I do think that this is probably pushing 1/11th. Again, 131s are not very large cars. What I was really hoping was that the Tamiya would be, again, more in line with a car that I already had. Now, there's one other car that I'm probably more annoyed with. My apologies. It's this new bag. I don't want to take it out because I've actually got this one up for sale right now. This is the Fiat Abarth 1000 TCR, and this is a 110 scale vehicle. Now the 600 is a rather small car, which is the Abarth is based on. With these two side by side, I'm going to try and look up some photographs and see what the differences between these are. Again, all of this is kind of pointless. I mean, if you want the 131 or if you want the Opel, or if you want the Escort, at least they make them. Was there any value in Tamiya making it that size? I would say no. You're talking about a significant cost differential between a tool this size versus a tool that size in terms of the bodies and all that. And the larger the body would be, the more inclined they would be to have additional molded accompanying pieces. And I simply do not believe that the Fiat 131 is popular enough to justify the cost. So maybe I should shut up and just be happy with what they've done here, even if it's not particularly in line with the Abarth and the already in existence 037. Body here, this is Rally Legends. It is a 110 scale platform. Whether or not it's 110 scale, that's up for calculation. So the final question is, what are my thoughts on the 131 MF01X chassis? I feel that the body leaves a lot to be desired. They've done a reasonably good job. There are a lot of fine details that people have pointed out that aren't exactly correct. And yes, that's true of all of these, by the way. I mean, that's just what it's like to translate a full-scale car to a tiny car. The biggest issue I had here was the absolutely tragic front end on the vehicle, which I have fixed. In fact, I fixed it better on this than I have on that. I might end up having to redo that one. The build of the chassis was a little bit annoying for some reason. I don't know why I was so irritated by the build. I did not like that at least for me, had to replace every single screw under this car with the machine screws, because I just knew that the self-tapping screws in the plastic will without a doubt crack. I feel that this has been to me a sore point for decades now, which means I didn't want to deal with it here. I think that the operational status of the chassis is fine. I think it's too loud, but whatever. I'm splitting hairs at this point here. I certainly have dealt with worse, like the utterly tragic M01 and M02 chassis, which between the horizontal front shock and the fact that everything is decomposing on these also leaves a lot to be desired. The MF01X is definitely a step above this one here. My best mini chassis would definitely be the M03, which again is pretty basic. This is front wheel drive versus four wheel drive, so I'm certainly not comparing apples to apples here. And while I was originally a little unhappy with the MF01X, I have gotten over it. Therefore, the question of should you get one does have to be addressed. If you are into the Fiat 131, then it's going to be hard-pressed to ignore this one. It is both smaller and less costly than the Rally Legends, which, by the way, is available once again. These are now, for quite a few years, you couldn't get them, and seems like they run a new batch. I don't know if it's the same chassis. There is a link up right now on this car's original review. It has a weird chassis. I don't know much about it, but other than that, it's been pretty good. This one did come pre-painted, and they've done a reasonably good job in most areas, other than this, which is a sticker and not properly installed, and they kind of mounted the body a little weird at the rear. But speaking of body mounts, you can see that there are no mounts here. The reason is I've created a magnetic system because one of the body mounts goes right through the hood scoop, which I thought was ridiculous. And at the rear, right through the middle of the back window. And as I wanted to have an interior, again, all this stuff will be covered on a future video. I simply could not tolerate it. I think if you are interested in the Fiat 131, this is an excellent option. I thought I was going to come into this more complaining, and I like to complain a lot, but it's a lot better than I gave it credit for initially with the Ampro parts like the grille, headlights, auxiliary lamps, turn signals, corner markers. Is that all? Oh, I did the wheels also. The wheels were way sunken in at the rear. Looked awful, absolutely awful. The Rally Legends car was exactly the same, by the way. It was me that offset these wheels. It's also got, in this case here, operational license plate lights, so we'll talk about that later. Muffler and some tips over here. And again, all these things we're going to talk about in an upcoming video. Well, my friends, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.